The October wind moved through a town nobody on a highway map had reason to slow down for. 3,800 souls, a grid of streets, a river bending around the western edge. And at the dead center of it all, set back from a cracked concrete pad, a building the town had spent 12 years pretending not to see. Two towers of red brick, 75 feet tall, crowned in copper gone the color of old pennies. Above the central bay door, four words cut into limestone. Per ignem vita, through fire, life. Inside the bay, a 1924 fire engine waited under a coat of gray dust, untouched, as if its crew had stepped out for dinner one evening and simply forgotten to come home. And on the courthouse lawn, 3 blocks east, a girl in worn sneakers raised her hand for a property nobody else in town would touch. The minimum bid was $10. She had 26 left to her name. Nobody knew what was waiting at the top of the eastern tower. Not yet. The candle flickered against brick walls that had not seen flame in 12 years. Goldie was on her knees, the flagstone floor cold through her jeans, her breath visible in the November air 90 feet above the town of Iron Bridge Falls, Pennsylvania. The room was small, octagonal, built into the top of the eastern tower like a secret folded inside a secret. And in her hand she held an envelope, sealed with wax, yellowed by years, the wax stamped with a 5-pointed star she did not yet recognize. Across the front, in handwriting that pressed hard into the paper, 4 words that did not belong to anyone else in the world: Marigold Aldridge, when you arrive. She did not open it. Not yet. She just looked at the letters that formed her name. The name she had written on intake forms and school registrations and 3,000 other pieces of paperwork. The name she had thought belonged only to her and a dead mother on a single sheet of carbon paper. And here it was, waiting. She closed her eyes. 4 weeks earlier, she had not known this room existed. The caseworker in Pittsburgh had a box of tissues on the corner of her desk, the kind they buy in bulk, off-brand, the cardboard already softening from the humidity of the radiator. She kept pushing it toward Goldie the way people push things toward you when they have nothing else to offer and the silence has gone on too long. Goldie did not take one. She sat in a plastic chair the color of swimming pools and kept her hands folded in her lap and her face still the way she had learned to keep it still in 9 different houses across 19 years. There was a water stain on the ceiling tile above the woman's head, shaped like a continent. Goldie traced the edges of it in her mind, gave herself something to do. You've aged out, Marigold. Goldie. I'm sorry. I go by Goldie. The woman wrote something in the folder, as if this were a clerical correction and not the only thing Goldie still owned. You've aged out of the system. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has no further obligation. Your bed will be reassigned by Friday. Goldie nodded. Do you have somewhere to go? Yes. She did not. The folder slid across the desk. Goldie opened it. Her entire life fit inside something thinner than a takeout menu. A birth certificate listing no father, a mother named Lyra Aldridge, deceased, a single Polaroid of herself as a toddler, sitting on a linoleum floor and clothes 2 sizes too big, one small hand reaching toward the edge of the frame as if she were trying to grab something just out of view. 7 months old when she was found, left at a county fire station by person or persons unknown. 9 foster placements over the years that followed. 9. She had counted them. The caseworker placed a check on top. This is your remaining balance, $43. Goldie folded it into her wallet next to the Polaroid. She picked up her duffel. Everything she owned was inside it. 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, a phone charger, a paperback she had been reading for 4 months because she kept losing her place. Good luck, Marigold. Goldie. But the door had already closed. She did the math standing in the hallway. $43. Bread $2.19. Peanut butter store brand $3.49. 12 days if she rationed. Maybe 13. After that, the math stopped working. She had learned to do this in the 3rd foster home, the one with the contractor who put her to work on weekends carrying lumber and cleaning job sites. He was not kind, but he was practical. And practicality turned out to be more useful in the long run than the soft thing people called kindness. He taught her how to read a structure, how to tell a load-bearing wall from a wall that was only pretending, how to look at a building and understand what it was actually doing under all the paint. He had not meant to teach her anything. He had just needed help on weekends. But Goldie had paid attention, because attention was the only currency she had ever had in any kind of abundance. The fifth placement was a woman with a garden who let her help on Sunday mornings. From that woman, she learned that patience was not the same thing as waiting. The seventh was a retired librarian who never locked her bookshelf. From her, Goldie learned that you could teach yourself almost anything if you were willing to sit with the question long enough. None of them had been her family, but each had given her something without knowing it. And Goldie had taken what was offered and built it into herself the way a bird builds with whatever it finds in the rain. The first month was the hardest. She slept behind a strip mall on the south side, then a maintenance shed by a closed pool, then under the overhang of a shuttered Blockbuster that had been closed since before she was born. The cold kept arriving earlier each evening, like it was practicing for winter. Her phone died on day 18. She drank from park fountains, ate at a soup kitchen on Tuesdays, sat on benches in the pale afternoon sun and tried to think clearly. The trucker picked her up at a rest stop outside Cranberry. Big man, gray beard, dashboard covered in grandchildren tucked into the visor. He did not ask questions, just turned the radio low and drove. Goldie watched Pennsylvania pass through the windshield. Towns with boarded storefronts, churches with marquees offering messages to drivers who did not stop, fields going brown in the late October chill, all of it belonging to somebody else, the way everything looks when you are moving through it without a place to land. He let her off at a junction outside a town called Iron Bridge Falls. Population 3,800. The sign said so. But the main street made the number feel optimistic. A hardware store on the corner with a hand-painted green sign, a diner with a bell above the door, a courthouse set back from the road, a flagpole, a bulletin board on the front face covered in flyers for church suppers and lost dogs, and a 5K that had happened 6 weeks earlier and nobody had bothered to take down. Goldie was walking past the board when the flyer caught her eye. County tax auction, this Saturday, 10 in the morning, 12 properties, minimum bids printed beside each one. She read down the list the way she read everything, top to bottom, nothing skipped. Because the thing that mattered was usually the thing that looked least important. The last entry read, former Central Firehouse, 14 Briggs Street, minimum bid $10. She read it twice. Walked past, stopped, walked back. Read it a third time, $10. A firehouse. She stood on the courthouse walk in the October afternoon and ran the numbers. $10 would leave her with 26. $26 in a condemned building she could not heat, could not live in, could not sell to anyone for any amount that would change her situation in any way that mattered. It was objectively, mathematically, undeniably the wrong thing to do. She pulled out her notebook and wrote down the address. She found a spot out of the wind under the overhang of a closed auto parts store. Spent the night there with her sleeping bag pulled up to her chin, running the numbers over and over in her head, looking for an answer that came out differently. It did not come out differently. By morning, she had decided to do it anyway, because every other property on that list had a floor. The vacant lot at 150, the condemned house at 1,200, the commercial unit with foundation issues at 300. They all had numbers that meant somebody believed they were worth something. But the firehouse started at 10, which meant whatever it was. Whatever damage time and neglect had done, it was sitting at the very bottom of somebody's accounting. And Goldie had spent every day of her life at the very bottom of somebody's accounting. She knew, from experience, that the bottom was not the same thing as worthless. Saturday came in overcast and cold, the sky a uniform gray pressing low over the town. Folding chairs had been set up on the courthouse lawn. 40 people were already seated when Goldie arrived, most of them in coats, most of them knowing each other in the easy way that people know each other in towns where nothing changes. She took the last chair in the back row. The county clerk had reading glasses and a microphone that cut out twice before he got it working. The first properties went easy. A man in a barn coat bought a vacant lot for $450 without looking up from his phone. A woman in a wool hat bought a condemned house for $1,100. The crowd was casual. They raised their paddles without ceremony. They paid without hesitation. They were spending money they would not miss on properties that fit into plans Goldie could not see. When the clerk got to the last item, he cleared his throat. He looked down at his papers, then up. Property number 12, former Central Firehouse, 14 Briggs Street, 3-story brick construction, Romanesque revival, built 1924, decommissioned in 2012. County assessment notes structural deterioration, standing water, roof drainage failure, twin hose drying towers. Original equipment present, including one 1924 American LaFrance Type 75 fire engine declared non-operational. Minimum bid is $10. Nobody moved. A man in the third row leaned over and said something quiet to the woman beside him. She shook her head with the finality of someone who had thought about this before she arrived. "Do I have $10? Goldie raised her hand. The shift was immediate and complete. 40 people turned in their folding chairs and looked at her. A girl in the back row with a duffel bag at her feet and worn sneakers and her hand up like she was answering a question in school. She kept her face still. She had been looked at her entire life in rooms full of people who expected her to be something else. She was practiced at it, receiving that kind of attention without flinching, without explaining herself. $10 from the young woman in the back. Do I hear 15 silence? 10 going once. Nothing. Going twice. The clerk let the pause sit. He looked out over the crowd. The crowd looked at Goldie. Goldie looked at the clerk. Sold. Nobody clapped. Nobody congratulated her. A woman in the second row turned all the way around. Small, white-haired, late 70s. Wire-rimmed glasses. A dark wool coat buttoned to the collar. There was a stillness about her that did not belong to ordinary old age. It was the stillness of someone who had been carrying difficult knowledge for a long time and had made a kind of accommodation with the weight of it. She looked at Goldie, and the expression on her face was not worry. It was not curiosity. It was not surprise. It was recognition of something the woman had been waiting for longer than Goldie had been alive. Goldie noticed her. The woman looked away, stood up, walked across the courthouse lawn with a wooden cane that had a worn rubber tip. She did not look back. By the time Goldie came out of the clerk's office with a deed folded into her duffel and a single key on a plain metal ring in her hand, the woman was gone. "You know what you're getting into?" the clerk asked. "No." He almost smiled. "Good luck with that one." Briggs Street was 3 blocks off the main road. Goldie found it without difficulty. The town used a grid, mid-century, the kind of orderly little American street plan that suggests whoever drew it had deep faith in the organizing power of right angles. She turned the corner and stopped walking because the building was not what the clerk had described. The clerk had said 3-story, brick, Romanesque revival. He had said twin hose drying towers. What he had not said, what no piece of paper could have said, was that the towers were 75 feet tall. They rose from either end of the firehouse like the towers of a small cathedral, tapered, crenellated at the top, built of red brick that had been laid by hand 101 years earlier. The mansard roof between them was copper, long since gone to that pale green patina that copper takes after a century of weather. And above the central bay door, carved into a slab of pale limestone, worn but legible, "Per ignem vita," through fire, life. Goldie stood on the cracked concrete pad and looked up. her throat tight in a way she could not have named, because she had bought a firehouse. That had been the plain fact of it 10 minutes earlier. But this was not a firehouse. This was a temple, built by people who believed firefighters were a kind of priesthood, and had laid every brick like they meant it. The bay doors were jammed partly open, tracks rusted solid. Weeds came up through every joint in the concrete with the patient, unstoppable persistence of things that grow in difficult places. A flagpole stood beside the western tower, lanyard hanging loose, making a small irregular sound against the metal in the October wind. She ducked under the bay door and stopped again, because inside the bay, half lit by the gray light coming through the gap above, was a fire engine. Not the rusted shell she had expected, but a 1924 American LaFrance, painted the deep burgundy that fire trucks had been before someone decided they all needed to be the same shade of red. The brass headlamps tarnished but intact. The wooden ladder still strapped to the side, the hose still coiled in its housing. Dust on every surface like a coat of gray flannel. But beneath the dust, the lines of it were unbroken. It looked like the truck had pulled in one afternoon, and the crew had gone to dinner, and nobody had ever come back. Goldie set down her duffel, walked a slow circle around the truck, reached out and touched the brass bell mounted above the cab. It rang, soft, once. The sound traveled up the open bay and into the rafters above and faded. A truck this old, in this condition, should have been in a museum, but here it was, in a building she had just bought for $10. She stood in the entrance and did not look at what was broken. She looked at what was holding. The brick walls were solid. She walked to the nearest one and put her palm flat against it, pressed hard. Nothing gave. She knocked along 3 sections and listened to the sound. Dense, consistent, no hollowness, no moisture working through the mortar. The steel beams overhead showed surface rust along the lower flanges, normal for a building this age that had been closed and unventilated. But when she looked at the cross-section of each beam, she could see the rust was superficial. A surface condition, not structural compromise. The floor under the standing water near the drain was level. She could feel it through her shoes. The steady resistance of concrete poured right. This was not a dying building. This was a building that had been left alone too long. And there was a difference. Goldie knew it, in her hands and feet, the way she knew how to read the structure of any space she entered, by what it resisted and what it gave, by the particular way a well-made thing holds itself even when nobody is looking after it anymore. She started exploring. Past the truck bay, a partition wall ran the width of the building. A doorway cut through it. Beyond the doorway, a hallway. Rooms on both sides. A bathroom with no door on the hinges. The toilet still in place. The sink intact. The mirror gone and the ghost of it on the wall where the paint had stayed brighter in its rectangular shadow. A kitchen with a counter and a sink and nothing else. The cabinet stripped out long ago. Old brass lever handles still on the faucet, gone dull with neglect. A bunk room with 6 metal bed frames bolted to the walls in pairs. Mattresses gone decades ago. The bolts still solid, the steel frames straight. At the back of the bunk room, a steel ladder bolted to the brick wall climbed up into a square opening in the ceiling, the hatch into the eastern tower. Goldie put her hand on the bottom rung, looked up, climbed. The tower interior was a long brick shaft, cool, dim, smelling of stone and dust in the particular dryness of enclosed vertical space. A wooden ladder bolted in segments climbed along the inside wall. Originally meant for hanging canvas hose to dry, the hook still in place along the brick. Empty now. Every 20 feet a small landing. Every landing a small window slit. The kind built for narrow vertical viewing. She climbed. Up, up. Until the bunk room below her was a small square of pale light at the bottom of the shaft. Until the wind sounded different at her elbow. Until she reached the 3rd landing and stopped, because the shaft above her did not continue. There was supposed to be more. The tower from outside was clearly taller. Another 15 feet at least. But the ladder ended here. The brick continued up, but the interior shaft seemed to end at a flat plastered ceiling, as if there were no fourth level, except there had to be. She had counted from the outside. 4 window slits visible. 3 of them she had passed climbing. The fourth one had been somewhere above her. She was sure of it. Goldie ran her fingers along the plaster ceiling, looking for a seam, looking for a hatch, looking for anything that would explain the math. She found it, a square section of plaster that did not quite match the rest. The line of the joint was so subtle you could not see it from below. You had to feel for it. Her fingertips traced the rectangle, roughly 2 feet by 2 feet, a trapdoor, disguised. She pushed. Nothing. She pressed harder, two-handed, sliding her palms along the surface to find the latch. There was no latch. It was sealed. From above, Goldie climbed back down, slowly, each rung deliberate, her mind running. There was a fourth level, hidden, behind a sealed trap door in a tower that nobody had climbed in 12 years. And the only person who looked at her at the auction like she had been expected was a small, white-haired woman who had walked away with a cane before Goldie could find her. She came down through the hatch into the bunk room, stood in the half-light, brushed brick dust off her palms. There was nothing she could do about the trapdoor tonight. She needed tools, she needed sleep, she needed to eat something. She walked back out through the truck bay into the October afternoon. Across the street, on the corner, sat the hardware store she had passed walking in. Crockett Hardware in dark green letters painted over what appeared to be a previous version of the same sign, a palimpsest of small-town commerce. The bell above the door rang when she pushed it open. The store was narrow and deep, shelves running floor to ceiling on both sides, tools and fasteners and cans of paint arranged in a system that made complete sense to whoever had built it and would take a stranger several visits to decode. A radio at the counter played country music at low volume, something old, unhurried. The store smelled like cut wood and machine oil. A man stood behind the register. 60s, broad through the shoulders, gray at the temples in the way gray comes from age rather than genetics. Canvas work shirt rolled to the forearm, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He looked up when the bell rang. He looked at her the way people in small towns look at strangers. Not unfriendly, just measuring. Help you. I need a pry bar and penetrating oil and a half-inch socket wrench if you carry them. What are you working on? The Firehouse across the street. The man's hand stopped on the catalog he had been holding. Not a dramatic movement, just a small, precise stop. The kind of stop that happens when a thought arrives faster than the body expects it to. You bought it. Yesterday. What's your name? Goldie Aldridge. The catalog closed. He looked at her for a long moment. His face did not change, but something behind his face changed, like a room going still inside a larger room. He set the catalog down on the counter. He took off his reading glasses. He folded the arms of them, placed them precisely beside the catalog. Bowen Crockett. Sir. How old are you, Goldie? 19. He nodded once, looked down at his hands, up again. You got a place to sleep tonight. In the Firehouse. That building's been cold for 12 years. It has a roof. He almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth did something, but he did not let it become an expression. He came around the counter, walked her down the center aisle to the tool section, pulled a socket set in a red plastic case from the shelf without consulting anything. The motion of a man who knew where every object in his store was at any moment. He pulled a pry bar from a hook, a blue can of penetrating oil, set them on the counter. Goldie looked at the prices. Socket set 22, pry bar 9, oil 450. She had 26. How much? For what? The tools. Take them. I have money. I know. Then take it. No. She looked at him. He looked back. He was not negotiating. He had decided something. Goldie did not know what, but she recognized the look of a person who had made up his mind. She had seen it on a few faces in her life. She had learned not to argue with it when it was pointed in her direction. Bring them back when you're done. Mr. Crockett. Bowen. Why? He looked at her for a moment. Then he turned away, walked back behind the counter, opened the small refrigerator that office workers keep in the corner, took out a paper bag, set it on top of the tools. My wife packs extra every morning, has done for 31 years. I've stopped arguing with her about it. Goldie picked up the bag. The contents were warm through the paper. Ham and Swiss. She could smell the mustard, sharp, the good kind, a coffee thermos, heavy in her palm. Thank you. Don't thank me, just bring the tools back. She turned to leave. Goldie. She turned back. He was looking at her with the same composed expression, but there was something in his eyes now that had not been there before. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Welcome to Ironbridge Falls. She nodded. The bell rang above her as she pushed out the door, crossed the street. The October light was going flat and gray over the towers as she ducked back under the bay door. She ate the sandwich sitting on the floor against the brick wall of the truck bay, with her back warming the cold of the wall against the warmth of her body. The 1924 La France loomed in front of her, the brass bell catching the last of the daylight from the bay opening. She chewed slowly, not because she was rationing, because someone had handed her food without asking for paperwork first. She had not eaten like that in a very long time. The coffee was strong, still warm. When she was done, she folded the paper bag carefully, set it beside her duffel. She unrolled her sleeping bag in the rectangle of cleared concrete next to the engine. The bricks behind her cold, but solid. Solid was better than most of what she had had access to recently. The wind came through the gap in the bay door and moved a fine drift of dust across the floor and settled it somewhere else. She looked up. The truck bay ceiling was open beams, old wiring running along the underside, 20-foot ceilings vanishing into the dark of the loft above. She thought about the trapdoor 70 feet over her head, inside the eastern tower, sealed from the other side. She thought about the way Bowen Crockett's hand had stopped on the catalog. She thought about the small, white-haired woman who had looked at her like she had been expected. She thought about the words above the bay door, carved into limestone, per ignem vita, through fire, life. She slept. She slept harder than she had slept in a month. She slept through the wind coming up. She slept through a small rain that pattered against the copper roof 3 stories above her. She slept through the long blue hours of false dawn when the truck bay turned the color of bone china. She woke to footsteps, slow, deliberate, the sound of a cane against concrete. Goldie sat up. The light through the bay door was pale. Early, maybe 6, maybe 7, hard to tell with the overcast. A woman stood in the bay doorway, small, white-haired, wire-rimmed glasses, the same dark wool coat from the auction, the wooden cane with the worn rubber tip. She stood at the threshold and did not come in. She did not need to come in. Goldie knew her face from 24 hours earlier. You came back, Goldie said. I never left. The voice was quiet, steady, deliberate the way her footsteps had been. You were at the auction. I sat in the second row. You looked at me. I looked at you. Why? The woman did not answer. She came in, slowly, each step placed carefully. She crossed the bay floor, walked around the La France the way you walk around a horse you used to know. Her hand drifted along the side of the truck, 3 fingers trailing along the burgundy paint, through the dust, leaving a small, clean line behind them. She stopped at the front of the cab, looked at the engine, said nothing for a long moment, then turned to face Goldie. My name is Phoebe Westmore. My husband was the last chief of the station. What was his name? Alden. He's dead. A year ago last August. He was 67. Goldie waited. Phoebe Westmore reached into the collar of her wool coat, drew out a thin silver chain. At the end of the chain hung a small brass key, worn smooth. The edges of the bow and bit softened by years of contact with skin, something that had been carried so long it had taken on the quality of the carrying. She held the chain in her open palm. This key opens a door at the top of the eastern tower. Goldie did not move. There is a room up there. Alden built it, sealed it. He moved the access panel and plastered over the trapdoor himself. Nobody in this town knows it exists except me. He told me 1 week before he died what was inside it and who it was for. Goldie's heart was doing something complicated, behind her sternum, like a bird pressed against a window. Who is it for? Phoebe Westmore looked at her. You! Goldie did not breathe. For a moment that lasted longer than a moment should. The truck bay went very still. The dust in the air went still. The wind outside went still. Then you don't know me. I know your name. How? That's what's inside the room. Goldie reached out a hand. Phoebe Westmore closed her fingers over the key. No. You said it was for me. It is, but I'm not handing it to you. What? I'm not handing it to you, Goldie Aldridge. The use of her name, both parts, from a woman she had never met. Her mother's surname coming out of a stranger's mouth in a building she had bought for $10. Goldie felt it in her teeth. Then what? You have to find something first. Find what? Something Alden hid for whoever found their way here. He told me that if you were really meant to come, you would come without me leading you. You would find the first thing on your own, and only then would I know to give you this. What's the first thing? I don't know. You don't know. Alden didn't tell me. He said the test was his, not mine. He said the girl would prove it to herself before she proved it to me. So I'm asking you, Goldie Aldridge, find what he left for you and bring it to me, and then I will give you what's around my neck. Goldie stared at her. How long do I have? As long as you need. How will I know it when I find it? You'll know. Phoebe Westmore tucked the chain back into the collar of her wool coat. She nodded once, turned, walked back across the truck bay. Slow, steady, the cane tapping a soft rhythm against the concrete. At the threshold of the bay door, she paused, looked back at Goldie over her shoulder. My husband and Walter Briggs spent 18 years looking for you between them. Neither of them ever found you, but Alden believed every day of those 12 years he carried it on his own that you would find this place when you were ready. I think today is the day he was right. She stepped out into the morning and was gone. Goldie sat on her sleeping bag, the cold concrete under her, the 1924 La France in front of her. The bay doors jammed open and the gray light coming through them. Her hands were shaking just a little, just at the fingertips. She stood up, she walked to the truck, put both hands on the burgundy paint, felt the dust against her palms, felt the cold steel beneath the dust, felt the structure of a thing that had been built right 101 years earlier. She thought two men were looking for me, for 18 years between them, and a man named Alden Westmore, whose wife knew my name, in a building above a town I had never heard of 3 weeks ago. He was looking for me. The thought arrived in pieces, as if her mind could not assemble it all at once, because the parts were too heavy to lift at the same time. She started searching, methodically, the way she did everything, beginning at the front of the truck bay, working her way back, every cabinet, every drawer, every locker, every closet, the kitchen, the bunk room, the bathroom, the small office off the side of the bay where the company captain would have done his paperwork. She found a coffee mug with a 1987 calendar painted on the side, empty, a clipboard with a maintenance schedule from 2011, The last entry replaced the gasket on the standpipe. AW. A child's drawing pinned to a corkboard, a red fire engine and a stick figure waving from the cab. Signed Tommy, age 6. A notebook of phone numbers, most of them disconnected. A jar of buttons. A box of birthday candles that had melted slightly and reformed in a sticky mass at the bottom. A pair of work gloves, stiff with disuse. None of it was the thing. She knew it was not the thing because Phoebe Westmore had said you'll know. And Goldie did not know yet. She kept searching. The afternoon was wearing on, pale sun behind clouds. She stood in the doorway of the captain's office and looked at the desk. Old metal desk, the kind they made in the 40s. 3 drawers down each side, a long flat center drawer, a typewriter on top, covered in dust. She sat down in the chair. The chair was cold. She opened the center drawer. Pencils, a ruler, a box of paper clips, a page from a 1996 calendar with a phone number scrawled in the margin. She opened the top right drawer. Empty. The next one. Empty. The next one. A small leather-bound book. Maroon. Worn at the corners. Tied closed with a piece of brown string. She lifted it out. She set it on the desk in front of her. She looked at it for a long moment before she pulled the string. The string came untied easily. The book opened. Inside the front cover, in handwriting that had faded from blue ink to brown ink to almost amber over decades of light, Walter Briggs. Station 12. She read the name twice. Frowned. This was not the right book. The clerk had said the building was Central Firehouse. Briggs Street. Not Station 12. The name Walter Briggs. Unknown to her. The handwriting old. Older than Alden Westmore could possibly have been. She turned the page. A date at the top of the second page. October 14th, 1984. First day as chief. Checked equipment. Reviewed roster. Walked the perimeter twice. The station is in good order. I intend to keep it that way. She turned the next page. The next. The next. She read. Sitting at the desk in the captain's office, the afternoon light shifting through the small window, she read for an hour. 2. The journal was dense. 40 years of entries, most of them short. Equipment inventories, training schedules, fire calls, notes about a leaking roof, a pump running rough, a faucet that had been dripping for a month and had been replaced on a Tuesday afternoon. The record of a man who ran a thing the way a thing was meant to be run. She kept turning pages until she was deep into the 1990s, and she came to a starred entry, a small 5-pointed star drawn in the margin in pencil. Spring 1996. Paid the Holloway family $250. Mortgage shortfall. Husband injured at the mill. Insurance dispute. Fund balance $22,400. Goldie read it. Read it again. She kept turning. More starred entries, scattered through the years. Small amounts, names, reasons. Each one a small payment to someone in the town. Medical bills, funeral costs. Rent secured for a family with children. College tuition for a boy whose father had volunteered at the station for 12 years. 40 years. 40 years of small, invisible kindnesses recorded in a dead man's handwriting. And then her hand stopped turning, because she had reached an entry from late 2005. The handwriting had shifted slightly, the ink slightly bluer, as if a new pen. October 2005. New volunteers this fall. Dorrance Aldridge Carpenter. Quiet. Reads a structure with his eyes. Fixed the engine bay door in 4 hours that the county said would take 6 weeks. Did not ask to be paid. Bringing his wife next Saturday. Her name is Lyra. She is a nurse at the clinic. Goldie stopped reading. She set the journal down. She did not move. She did not breathe. Then she reached into her wallet, pulled out the birth certificate, the Polaroid, the check for $43 she had not yet cashed, her entire life on 3 pieces of paper. She set the birth certificate down beside the journal. The line read, Mother Lyra Aldridge, deceased, father unknown. The 2 pieces of paper sat on the dusty desktop, the journal entry and the birth certificate, the same 2 words appearing in both. Lyra Aldridge. Goldie picked up the journal again. Read forward. The next entry mentioning her mother was 3 pages later. Late October 2005. Lyra Aldridge arrived this morning. Joined the company. Quiet, precise, completely unafraid in situations that undo other people. Dorrance brought her. I think this may be the best thing he has ever done for the station, which is saying something, because Dorrance Aldridge has done a great deal. The next. November 2005. Lyra and Dorrance Aldridge married this afternoon in the truck bay. 43 guests. Folding chairs. The engine moved outside for the day. Lyra wore a blue dress. Dorrance wore his volunteer's coat. May brought a wedding cake from the bakery on Main. Best afternoon the station has had in a decade. The next. March 18th, 2006. Lyra Aldridge gave birth this morning. 6 pounds 4 ounces. Healthy. They have named her Marigold. Goldie stopped. She read the line again. She read it a third time. They have named her Marigold. Her own name. In a dead man's handwriting. 40 years of careful blue ink. 19 years old now. Sitting in a desk drawer in a captain's office in a firehouse she had bought for $10. Her own name, written down, on the day she was born, by a man she had never heard of, in a town she had not known existed 3 weeks earlier. She closed the journal. She held it against her chest. Her hands were not steady. Outside the small window of the captain's office, the November light was going. Long pale bars of late sun slanting across the floor of the truck bay through the gap in the doors. The 1924 La France sat in the half-light like something that had been waiting a long time to be looked at properly. Goldie stood up. She walked through the doorway, down the hall, through the bunk room, to the foot of the steel ladder bolted to the wall. She looked up. 70 feet of brick shaft, a sealed trapdoor at the top, behind a plastered ceiling. She thought he hid the trapdoor from anyone who didn't know to look for it. He left the journal where anyone could find it. But the thing he hid up there was for someone who would search, for someone who would not stop after the first empty drawer. Who would open all of them? Who would feel the seam in a ceiling and know it should not be there? For someone who could read a building, the way her father had read a building. She put the journal in her duffel. She tied the laces of her sneakers. She wrapped her sleeping bag around her shoulders like a cloak against the cold of the tower. She walked back to the truck bay where she had left the pry bar and the socket set and the can of penetrating oil that Bowen Crockett had let her take without payment. She picked them up. She walked to the foot of the ladder, her hands on the cold steel rung, her breath visible. The light in the bunk room behind her almost gone. Phoebe Westmore had said, find the first thing. But Goldie had found 2 things now. A journal with her name in it, and a sealed door at the top of a tower that should not be there. She did not know yet which one was the first thing the old woman had meant, but she was going to find out. She started to climb. She climbed in the dark. 70 feet of brick shaft, 1 rung at a time, the duffel bag slung across her shoulder, the pry bar tucked through the strap, the penetrating oil in her jacket pocket bumping against her ribs with every step. The wind moved differently at 30 feet than it had at 10, then differently again at 50. By 60 feet, she could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She reached the 3rd landing. The ladder ended. The plastered ceiling above her, smooth, innocent looking. The kind of surface you would not notice unless you knew to. She set the duffel on the small wooden landing, pulled out the pry bar, pressed the flat end against the seam she had found that morning. She paused. Because once she did this, Once she broke the seal, whatever was on the other side, she would have done it. She thought I bought this building for $10. I am allowed to break a ceiling I own. She drove the pry bar up. The plaster gave with a soft cracking sound, like someone stepping on dry leaves. A line of white powder drifted down past her face. She pulled, pried. The seam widened. The square section of plaster shifted on a hidden hinge she had not been able to see from below. It dropped open. A hatch, hinged at the rear. Above it, a square of darkness. Cold air pouring down past her face. Cool, steady. The kind of air that comes from a sealed space that has held still for a long time. Goldie reached up, felt for the edge of the hatch frame, pulled herself through. She was inside the fourth level of the eastern tower. She stood up slowly. The room was round, maybe 12 feet across, built into the top of the tower like the inside of a hollow finial. The walls curved inward toward a wooden ceiling that came to a low point above her head. There was no electricity. There was no need to look for a switch. The room had been built to be lit by something else. A small window slid on each of the four compass points. The eastern slit was the only one not painted over. The others, north, south, west, were blacked out with paint that had been brushed on 101 years ago and never removed. The eastern slit was clear. Through it, Goldie could see all of Iron Bridge Falls. The grid of streets, the courthouse, the diner, the hardware store across Briggs Street with its green sign, the whole town laid out below her like a map, the Allegheny Hills rolling away beyond it, the river bending around the western edge in the last of the late afternoon light. She stood at the window slit and looked. A long moment. Then she turned to the room. A desk sat against the curve of the brick wall opposite the eastern window. Small, wooden, hand-built. The kind of desk a man would have made for himself rather than bought. On top of it, a leather-bound journal, like the one downstairs but newer. The leather still dark instead of faded amber. A candle in a brass holder. A box of long matches. A coffee mug that had once been white. A rolling chair pulled back from the desk at an angle that suggested someone had stood up. Two filing cabinets flanked the desk. A small fireproof safe was bolted to the concrete floor under the desk. The walls, the curving brick walls, were covered in photographs. Mismatched frames, some wood, some metal, some that had been pieced together from scraps. Firefighters in turnout gear. Group photographs in front of the bay doors with the 1924 La France visible behind them. Individual portraits. Newspaper clippings mounted under glass. The dust on every surface was uniform and undisturbed. The dust on the desk, the dust on the photographs, the dust on the candle, the same depth, the same color. Nobody had been in this room in a long time. Goldie's breath was small clouds in the air. She crossed to the desk. She lit the candle. The match struck. The flame caught. The room came alive in a small, soft circle of yellow light. The shadows of the photograph frames lengthened along the curving walls. The desk surface glowed warmly. The handwriting in the journal still visible. Open at a page from 12 years earlier. She did not sit down yet. She walked the perimeter of the room, slowly, reading the wall. There was a section she could not look away from. 4 feet long, 3 feet high, filled with a single subject. Photograph after photograph of the same two people. A man in his late 20s, dark eyes, square jaw. The kind of face built for endurance rather than for being looked at. A woman in her mid-20s, high cheekbones, a direct gaze that held the camera without performance. They stood in the truck bay. They stood in front of the La France. They stood at a station picnic with a paper plate and a cup of lemonade. They stood at a wedding in matching volunteer coats. They stood with a baby in a car seat between them, 6 months old, maybe 7. A small fist curled against a cheek. Goldie stopped in front of the last photograph. It was a Polaroid, taped to the brick, the corners curling, the colors faded to amber. A baby, sitting on a linoleum floor, enclosed 2 sizes too big, one small hand reaching toward the edge of the frame. She knew the photograph. Of course she knew it. She had been carrying its twin in her wallet for 19 years. She reached into her jacket, pulled out the Polaroid, set it beside its match on the brick wall. The exact same image, same baby, same linoleum, same reaching hand. One worn smooth in the center from years of being held in foster homes. The other still flat on the brick. She stood there for a long time, just looking. The candle behind her threw her shadow long across the photographs. The shadow of a 19-year-old standing in front of every photograph of her own parents she would ever see. She did not cry. She had not learned to do that yet. Not in front of anyone. Not in front of herself. The closest she came was a tightness in her throat that traveled down behind her sternum and lodged itself there like a small hot coin. She turned away from the wall, walked back to the desk, sat down in the rolling chair. The chair creaked, the wheels stiff from years of disuse. It rolled half an inch and stopped. She set her hands on either side of the open journal. She began to read. The handwriting was different from the one downstairs. This was not Walter Briggs. This was Alden Westmore. The first entry was dated 12 years earlier, October 14th, 2013. Walter died last spring. Closed Station 12 in November. Now I am the only one who knows where she went. Or rather, I am the only one who knows nothing about where she went, which is the same problem from the other side. I bought the building today, from the county, $35,000. May Briggs signed the transfer. The county was going to tear it down for a parking structure. They are not going to tear it down. This is not for me. This is for the girl. Goldie read it again, read it a third time. She turned the page. The entries went on. Alden's handwriting, crisp, compressed. He had inherited Walter's habits in everything but the slope of the pen strokes. The journal moved through the years, repairs to the building, quiet payments still going out from the fund, letters sent to the foster care system, letters returned, letters sent, letters returned. She turned the pages faster. The narrative built, a man searching for someone he had never met. Year after year, the bureaucracy responding with form letters or with nothing at all. The private investigator hired in 2016. The 2 private investigators hired in 2019. The legal aid attorney consulted in 2021. The state legislator written to in 2022. The letter to the family court judge in 2023. She read it from the copy folded inside the journal. The original sent. The copy kept. 3 pages of careful handwriting. Goldie had to set the pages down twice to take breaths. Alden had not been her relative. He had no legal standing. The system had rules designed to protect children from people whose interest in finding them might be predatory. And those rules did not have room to distinguish between an old fire chief who had watched her parents die and a stranger who might want to hurt her. The judge had not replied. Goldie set the letter down. She sat in the dark. The candle on the desk wavered, steadied. The light spilled across the journal pages and across her hands and across the small circle of polished wood and stopped at the edge of the dust. She thought, he spent 12 years up here, alone, climbing 70 feet of brick ladder, sitting at this desk, writing letters, lighting the candle, watching the town through 1 window slit and 3 painted-over windows, looking for a child whose name he did not know. And she had been 300 miles east, moving through 9 foster homes, eating peanut butter at midnight in a maintenance shed. Neither of them had known. She closed the journal. She knelt in front of the safe. The keyhole was small, the kind that takes a brass key with a delicate bit, the kind of key that hangs on a thin silver chain around the neck of a small white-haired woman who had told her this morning to find the first thing herself. Goldie did not have the key, but she had found everything else. She climbed down. She climbed down 70 feet of brick ladder in the dark. The candle stayed lit on the desk above her. She came down through the trap door, down through the bunk room, out into the truck bay, out under the jam bay door. The November dusk had come early. The streetlights were on along Briggs Street. She did not put on her jacket. She just walked. She walked the 3 blocks to Phoebe Westmore's house. The address was on a small brass plate on the front of the mailbox. P. Westmore, 218 Linden. Goldie had walked past it that morning without knowing. A small Victorian, white clapboard, a porch with 2 wicker chairs, a garden in the front yard that had been put to bed for winter, stalks of dead lavender, a scrap of frost on the lawn. The porch light was on. She climbed the steps. She knocked on the door. A long moment, then footsteps. The door opened. Phoebe Westmore stood in the doorway in a long gray cardigan over a flannel nightgown, glasses on a chain around her neck, the brass key still around her neck on the silver chain. She looked at Goldie, looked at her face, took a slow breath. "You found it." "I found a journal, and a sealed door, and a wall of photographs of my parents." "Which was the first thing?" "I don't know. I think the journal." "Why?" "Because the journal has the date my mother went into labor. With me." Phoebe Westmore closed her eyes, just for a moment, then opened them. She reached up, unhooked the silver chain, lifted it over her head. She held it out. "Take it." Goldie reached for it, stopped. "He looked for me for 12 years. And Walter for 6 before him, 18 years between them." Goldie's hand closed around the key. The chain was warm where it had been against Phoebe Westmore's skin all day. "Why didn't you come find me?" "I tried after Alden died. I drove to Pittsburgh. I sat in the county foster office for 2 hours, and they told me they could not release any information. I did not have legal standing. They suggested I write to the state. I wrote to the state. They sent me a form. I sent the form back. They sent another form. After 6 months of forms, I sat down at the kitchen table and I cried, and I said to the empty house, Alden was right. The girl is going to have to find us, because we cannot find her. And then I bought the building for $10. And then you bought the building for $10. They stood on the porch. The October wind moved through the lavender in the front yard, a small, dry rustling. "There is one more thing in that room," Phoebe said. "In the safe. It's the only thing I can't tell you about because Alden never told me." "What?" "A letter, sealed. He addressed it to you by name. He said it was for the day you arrived. He said, 'Phoebe, some things should be said by the person who said them, not relayed.' So I never opened it, and I do not know what it says." Goldie looked down at the key in her palm. "I should go back. I'll walk with you, halfway." "You don't have to." "I know." Phoebe Westmore put on her wool coat over the cardigan, took her cane from the stand by the door, walked beside Goldie down the 3 blocks to the firehouse. They did not speak. The wind moved leaves along the gutter ahead of them. The street lights turned the leaves the color of brass. At the corner of Briggs and Linden, Phoebe stopped. "I'll wait here." "Why?" "Because what's up there is yours, not mine." Goldie nodded, crossed the street, ducked under the bay door, climbed. The candle was still burning on the desk when she came up through the trapdoor. The room had taken on the warm, small glow of a place inhabited. She knelt in front of the safe. The brass key fit perfectly. She turned it. The lock released with a clean, precise click. The door swung open. 3 items inside, each one placed separately, each one deliberate. A leather document folder, dark brown, cracked along the spine from age. A thick manila envelope, sealed. No writing on the outside. And a white envelope with a wax seal that had been pressed into a 5-pointed star. The wax yellowed by years, the surface showing the small indentation of a thumb pressed in when the wax was still warm. Across the front in handwriting that pressed hard into the paper, Marigold Aldridge when you arrive. Goldie held the envelope. She did not open it. Not yet. She set it on the desk. She picked up the leather folder first. Inside, a property deed, the Firehouse at 14 Briggs Street, purchased by Alden Westmore from Allegheny County in 2013 for $35,000. Signed and notarized and recorded with the county register. Attached, a trust agreement. Upon the death of Alden Westmore, the property would transfer to a revocable trust held at the Ironbridge Falls Bank and Trust. The trust had a single designated beneficiary, Marigold Aldridge, daughter of Dorrance Daniel Aldridge and Lyra Ann Aldridge, both deceased formerly of Ironbridge Falls, Pennsylvania. Goldie read the line 3 times. She had been the beneficiary of the trust since before she had known the trust existed. The auction had been the mechanism the county used to recover delinquent taxes after Alden's death. But the building had been hers from the moment Alden bought it. She had not bought the Firehouse for $10. She had paid $10 to find the Firehouse that had been waiting for her. She set the deed down, opened the manila envelope. Inside, bank documents from the Ironbridge Falls Bank and Trust, 40 years of account statements, the account name Station 12 Community Fund, contribution records from every firefighter who had ever served, pancake breakfasts, car washes, holiday fundraisers, anonymous deposits made in steady increments every month since 2007. The most recent balance. She looked at the number, looked again. $412,389.62. She set the bank documents down beside the deed. She thought, this is the part where I should not be sitting alone in a tower, but she did not know who to call. So she sat alone. She reached for the white envelope. She broke the wax seal. The flap opened cleanly. Inside, 2 pages, handwritten on both sides, small, careful letters. The handwriting of a man who had thought for a long time about what he wanted to say and was trying to get it exactly right. She began to read. Dear Marigold, I don't know how old you'll be when you read this. I've been searching for you for 12 years, if you're reading this. Then you found your way here on your own, which is what I have always believed you would do, because you are Dorrance Aldridge's daughter and Lyra Aldridge's daughter, and neither of them ever waited for anyone to open a door for them. Goldie stopped, read the sentence again, kept going. Your father was Dorrance. He was a carpenter. He came to the station one Saturday morning and asked if anything needed fixing. There was always something. He fixed everything he touched. He rebuilt the engine bay doors. He repointed the brick on the south wall. He rewired the kitchen over one long weekend. He never asked to be paid. He had hands that understood how things were supposed to fit together. He had a patience for getting it right that I have not seen since. Your mother was Lyra. She was a nurse at the clinic on the east side of town. She joined the volunteers because your father asked her to. She became the best medic the station ever had. She was quiet. She was precise. She had a calm in emergencies that made everyone around her calmer. They fell in love at the station. I watched it happen over 2 years of Saturday mornings. They were married in the truck bay in November of 2005. You were born in March of 2006. Your father painted the nursery yellow because your mother said yellow was the color of patience. She brought you to the station in a car seat when you were 3 months old. She set you on my desk while she ran drills. You were the happiest baby I have ever seen. You reached for everything. You grabbed at whatever was in front of you with both hands, completely certain it was worth grabbing. Your father built you a wooden fire truck with your name painted on the side. He showed it to me before he gave it to you, holding it up in the truck bay, with a grin that made him look 12 years old. Goldie set the letter down, looked at the ceiling, the wooden vault above her head, the candle flame moving slightly, the shadows of the brick courses on the walls. She breathed. In, out, in. She picked up the letter again. On October 14th, 2006, the elementary school on Maple Street caught fire. An electrical fault in the basement, the boiler room. 14 children were trapped on the 2nd floor, a 3rd grade class. Your parents were the first volunteers through the door. They sent every child out through the windows. They carried some of them down ladders. Every single one of those 14 children made it onto the ground outside. The stairwell collapsed while your parents were still on the second floor. They did not make it out. Your mother and father did not die in a fire. They died running into one because there were children inside who needed them. That is the only sentence about their deaths that matters. It is the truest and most complete description of who they were that I know how to write. Goldie put her face in her hands. For a long moment, she did not move. The candle wavered. When she lifted her head, her cheeks were wet. She had not noticed it happening. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand, looked back down at the letter. She kept reading. I tried to find you. I called the county. I called the state. I wrote letters to every office I could think of. I hired investigators. I contacted legislators. I did everything I could think of, and then I thought of more things, and I did those too. The foster care system had rules I could not get around. I was not a relative. I had no legal standing. 12 years of searching, and I never found a single door that opened. So I did the only other thing I could do. I bought this station with my own money because the county wanted to tear it down, and I was not going to let that happen. This is where your parents worked, where they laughed, where they fell in love, where they left from on the morning they saved 14 children. I could not bring them back. I could not find you, but I could keep the building standing. I sealed this office because I did not trust anyone else to keep it safe. I plastered over the trap door. I told no one except Phoebe where the key was and what it was for. Everything you need is here. The deed to the station, which is yours. The fund, which is yours. And this letter. Use what I have left you however you see fit. Help people if you can. Be the kind of person your parents would recognize. One more thing. The station is in your name. The fund is in your name. But neither of those things is what I most wanted to give you. What I most wanted to give you was this. You were loved from the moment you were born. Your father held you on the day you came home from the hospital. He stood in the truck bay with you in his arms and showed you the engine and told you the names of all the parts as if you were going to remember them. Your mother sang to you in the car on the way to the station. You fell asleep every time before she finished the second verse. You were wanted and you were cherished. You were the center of two people's lives for 7 months before everything changed. You were never forgotten, not for a single day of any of those years. Alden Westmore, Chief, Station 12, October 2023. Goldie folded the letter. She held it in her hands. She sat in the chair in the small round room at the top of the tower, and she let what was in her have room. She was still sitting there, maybe 20 minutes later. When she heard the knock at the bottom of the tower, she came down, slowly, the letter folded in her jacket pocket, the brass key around her neck on the silver chain, the candle blown out behind her, the trap door pulled closed. Phoebe was waiting in the truck bay. She did not ask any questions. She just looked at Goldie. Goldie nodded once. Phoebe nodded back. That was the whole conversation. The next morning was a Monday. Goldie walked to the Iron Bridge Falls Bank and Trust at 8:30. The deed in her duffel, the trust documents in her hands, the brass key on the silver chain inside the collar of her sweatshirt. The bank manager was a woman named Cordy Marwick, 60s, square reading glasses on a beaded chain. She took the trust documents and disappeared into her office for 40 minutes. Pulled records, made phone calls, reviewed the original trust agreement with the attention of a woman who understood that what was sitting across her desk was not routine. When she came back out, she set the documents on the desk between them. The trust is valid. The funds are yours. The balance has been accruing interest since Mr. Westmore's death. Current balance $412,389.62. I'd like to withdraw $200 for now. Of course. And I'd like the rest to stay in the account. Of course. Cordy Marwick counted out the bills, slid them across the desk. Goldie put them in her wallet. She walked back to the firehouse. There was a car at the curb, a silver sedan she did not recognize. A man stood on the concrete pad. He wore a dark gray suit and polished shoes that looked entirely wrong on the cracked concrete. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to entering spaces and having them adjust to his presence. 27, maybe 28, hair the color of wheat. He looked at her with the recalibrated expression of someone who had been expecting someone else. You the owner. I am. He produced a card. Read Faraday. I develop commercial properties in this region. I had plans for this block. The station isn't for sale. Everything has a number. Not this. I'll offer 5,000. That's 500 times what you paid at auction. The station isn't for sale. He looked at her with the measuring expression of a man recalculating. There are encumbrances on the title. The county failed to disclose them at auction. My attorney has filed a petition for review. The deed is recorded. The trust is valid. Trust can be challenged. This one cannot. She walked past him into the bay. She did not slam the door behind her. The bay did not have a door to slam. She climbed the ladder to the tower. Phoebe was waiting for her at the foot of the ladder when she came back down 20 minutes later. She had walked over from her house. She did not ask how the bank had gone. She handed Goldie a piece of paper, a handwritten address, a name, Cressida Beauchamp, Hotel Algonquin, Room 217, Pittsburgh. Who is this? She called me this morning, 3 times before 9. She says she is your cousin. I don't have a cousin. She says she has documents. I don't have a cousin. She wants to meet with you. She wants to discuss the trust. Goldie stared at the paper, looked up at Phoebe. How does she know about the trust? That is the question. By noon, the woman was at the bay door. She had not waited for Goldie to make the drive to Pittsburgh. She had driven to Ironbridge Falls herself. A tall woman in her early 50s, cream-colored coat, pearl earrings, hair the color of warm honey expertly streaked. The kind of woman who looked like she belonged in the lobby of a hotel called the Algonquin. She crossed the cracked concrete pad in heels that had no business being on it. Marigold. Goldie. I'm so sorry, Goldie. Who are you? I'm your aunt, by marriage, through your mother's side, Cressida Beauchamp. I've been looking for you since 2006. Have you? Yes. How? Through various channels. What channels? Marigold, Goldie. I'm sorry, could we sit somewhere? Here is fine. The woman looked at the bay, looked at the La France, looked at Goldie's sneakers. Of course. She opened a leather portfolio, began producing documents. A genealogy chart printed on cream paper. A copy of a marriage certificate showing one Cressida Beauchamp marrying a man named Mason Aldridge in 1998. A photocopy of a death certificate for the same Mason Aldridge in 2002. A letter on cream stationery from a lawyer in Philadelphia confirming Cressida's relationship to the Aldridge family. It looked, at a glance, reasonable. Goldie did not take any of the documents from the woman's hand. You said you've been looking for me since 2006. Yes. How? I tried the foster system. Did you? I sent letters? To whom? I don't recall the exact agencies. It was years ago. You don't recall. I have so many. I'm sorry. Could we go somewhere warmer? What do you want, Mrs. Beauchamp? The woman did not blink, but her shoulders relaxed half an inch. The way the shoulders of a person relax when a negotiation has finally arrived at its real subject. I want to help you. With the trust. I understand from public records there is a significant inheritance. As your closest living relative, I have a legal interest in ensuring it is administered correctly. I'd like to propose a modest arrangement. 45%. You retain 55. I cover all administrative costs, lawyer fees, accountants. It's standard for situations like this. How did you know about the trust? Public records. Tax records aren't public. The auction was public. The auction was for unpaid taxes, not the trust. I have resources. Mrs. Beauchamp. Yes. I am going to need you to leave. Marigold. Goldie. You are 19 years old. You are alone. You have no representation. You have no idea what you are sitting on. I am the only family you have. I am trying to protect you. Then leave. The woman's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She picked up her portfolio. I'll be in town for a few days, at the Algonquin. When you change your mind. She walked back across the concrete to her car. A black SUV. Not the rental of a woman who had driven up from Pittsburgh. It had plates from a Philadelphia leasing agency. Goldie watched the SUV pull away. Then she turned and walked to the hardware store. Bowen Crockett looked up when the bell rang. Goldie, I need to use your computer. Help yourself, back office. She sat at his desktop in the back room, pulled up the Pennsylvania Court Records database, typed Cressida Beauchamp. The first result was a 2019 civil case in Bucks County. The second was a 2021 case in Delaware County. The third was a 2023 case in Montgomery County. In each one, a Cressida Beauchamp had attempted to claim partial inheritance from an estate by asserting unrecognized family relation. In each one, the claim had been dismissed. In each one, the targeted heir had been a young person who had recently aged out of foster care. Goldie sat back in the chair. She read each case summary twice. She thought, this woman makes a living, hunting children like me. Then she thought she knew about the trust. How? Goldie printed the case summaries, 3 copies of each. She put one set in her duffel. She put the second set in a sealed envelope addressed to the Pennsylvania office of the Attorney General. She mailed it that afternoon from the post office on Main, with the third set tucked into her jacket pocket as backup. By the following Tuesday, Cressida Beauchamp's name would be in the inbox of a Commonwealth investigator who specialized in elder and inheritance fraud. By the end of the month, a subpoena would issue from Harrisburg. Cressida would never set foot in Ironbridge Falls again. But Goldie did not know that yet. What she knew was that someone in this town had told her. She went back to the firehouse. She climbed the tower. She lit the candle. She sat at Alden's desk and stared at the photographs of her parents on the curving brick wall. She thought. The bank manager, Cordy Marwick, had access to the records. The county clerk did. The judge who had signed off on the trust did. Phoebe did. But Phoebe was the one who had warned her. Whoever had told Cressida had access either to the bank or to the county, which narrowed it, but not enough. The candle wavered. And then, Goldie thought of something else. The caseworker. The caseworker in Pittsburgh who had handed her the manila folder 4 weeks ago. If a person had been tracking foster youth aging out of the system, specifically for this purpose, the caseworker office would be the place to do it. She came down the ladder. She walked back to Crockett Hardware. Bowen was behind the counter. Bowen? Yes. I need to look up an address. Whose? My caseworker from Pittsburgh. He pulled the laptop over without asking why. It took Goldie 40 seconds to find the address. The name on the office door was Imogen Saltonstall, MSW Senior Caseworker, Allegheny County Office of Youth and Family Services. But Imogen Saltonstall had retired 3 years earlier. According to a public archive of departmental newsletters that Bowen helped Goldie locate, she had retired suddenly, mid-fiscal year. The newsletter had thanked her for 38 years of service. There had been a small cake. And then, 2 weeks later, she had moved to Ironbridge Falls. Goldie looked up from the laptop. Bowen! Yes. Do you know an Imogen Saltonstall? I know an Imogen. She moved in 3 years back. Quiet woman, lives over on Sycamore. Why? Goldie did not answer. She closed the laptop. She walked outside. The November light was already starting to slant low, the sun behind the western tower throwing the shadow of the firehouse all the way across Briggs Street. She walked east, towards Sycamore. There was no house number on the mailbox, but the porch light was on, a small bungalow, white shutters, a wreath of bittersweet on the door. Goldie knocked. A woman opened the door. 60s, heavy reading glasses, a blue cardigan over a turtleneck, a face that Goldie had seen exactly once, in an office that smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. The caseworker's eyes widened. She put her hand against the doorframe. She had to, because for a moment, her knees did not hold. Marigold. Goldie, you found me. I wasn't looking for you. I was looking for the person who told Cressida Beauchamp about my trust. Imogen Saltonstall closed her eyes. She opened them. It wasn't me. How do you know it wasn't you? Because I have been trying for 3 years to give you something, and I would not have ruined that by telling a woman like her anything. Trying to give me what? The woman stepped aside. Come in, please. I have it here. I have had it here the whole time, waiting for if you ever found this place. Goldie hesitated on the threshold. The wind moved cold against her back. She stepped inside. The living room was small, a tea kettle on the stove just past the kitchen doorway making a small sound, a reading chair, a floor lamp, a wall of bookshelves, and on a small side table next to the chair, a wooden box, the size of a shoebox. Old, pine, hand-built. Imogen Saltonstall walked to the side table, lifted the box with both hands, brought it back to where Goldie stood. I knew the records retention policy. After 15 years, inactive cases get shredded. The box was scheduled for destruction the month I retired. I asked the records clerk if I could be the one to take it to the shredder. She said yes. I took it home instead. I retired the next morning. I moved here because Alden Westmore lived here, and I had heard about him from a colleague who once tried to help him. And I thought, if she ever finds him, she will find me, and if she doesn't, I will die with these in my basement. Goldie looked at the box. What is it? 47 letters, written by Alden Westmore, postmarked between 2008 and 2023. Addressed to the county office where I worked, each one requesting any information that might be available about Marigold Aldridge. Each one returned to sender or filed and ignored. The system kept them all. Because that is what the system does. It keeps things, even when it refuses to act on them. And then after 15 years, it throws them away, so that no one will ever read them. Imogen Saltonstall held out the box. They were always yours. Goldie took the box. The weight of it was more than she expected. 47 letters. She did not open it on the porch. She did not open it in the cab of Bowen Crockett's pickup truck on the way back to Briggs Street. She did not open it in the truck bay. She carried it up the ladder, up the 70 feet of brick shaft, up through the trap door, into the tower room. She set the box on the desk. She lit the candle. She sat down. She opened the box. The letters were arranged by year, oldest at the back, most recent at the front. Each one a clean sealed envelope addressed to a county office in handwriting she now recognized. Each one stamped returned or no action required or simply filed. A few had handwritten notes from the recipients. Not a relative. No legal standing. The bureaucratic language for go away. She picked one at random. Mid-stack, 2014. She opened it. Read. It was a single-type page. Polite, persistent, asking for any information that might be available. She picked another. 2017. Same content, slightly different wording. She picked another. 2020. Same content, slightly more desperate. The handwriting on the signature less steady than it had been in 2014. She picked another. 2023. The last one. The handwriting on the signature very unsteady, the letter shorter than the others. To whom it may concern, I am running out of time. I do not have many more years to write you. Please, If you have any record of Marigold Aldridge, please let her know I exist. Please let her know her parents existed. Please let her know she was wanted. Goldie put her face in her hands again. The candle wavered. The wind moved past the eastern window slit. The town lay below, lit in the slow blue dusk. She closed the letters. She closed the box. She sat there a long time. When she finally moved, it was to open the safe one more time. She had left two items inside, the deed and the bank documents. Now there was a third thing she could feel pressed into the back of the safe she had not noticed before. She reached in, pulled out a small white envelope. This one was not sealed. The flap was tucked. The envelope was newer than the others. Plain white office paper, no wax, no handwriting on the front. She opened the flap. Inside, a single index card. In Alden's handwriting, if anyone tries to take this from her, open the second drawer of the Eastern filing cabinet. Top folder, marked Faraday. A.W. Goldie looked up. The Eastern filing cabinet was 3 feet from her elbow. She stood, crossed to the cabinet, opened the second drawer, a green hanging file. Top of the drawer, a neat label in Alden's hand. Faraday. She lifted out the folder, sat down at the desk, opened it, and the photograph that slid out into her lap was a school portrait, a small boy in a striped shirt, maybe 7, maybe 8, hair the color of wheat. Big, serious eyes looking just past the camera at something the photographer had said to make him almost smile. On the back of the photograph in Alden's handwriting, Reed Faraday, survivor, Maple Street School fire. October 14th, 2006, second floor classroom. Lyra Aldridge carried him out the east window. The candle wavered. The dust in the room went still, and from somewhere very far away, Goldie heard her own voice. Not loud, almost a whisper. She said, "Oh." She closed the folder. She blew out the candle. She climbed down. Goldie did not sleep that night. She lay in the sleeping bag in the truck bay, the 1924 La France looming above her, the brass bell catching the small orange glow of a single bay light she had wired up from the panel that afternoon. She thought about a boy in a striped shirt, 7 years old, maybe 8, big, serious eyes, carried out an east window by a woman he could not have remembered the face of. She thought, he sat on my mother's lap for 30 seconds, maybe less, long enough to be carried down a ladder. And then he lived. And my mother did not. And he grew up in this town, knowing, every day, that a woman he could not remember had died for him. She turned over, the cold of the concrete coming up through the sleeping bag against her hip. She thought, he wants to tear this building down, because the building is the place she left from. And then she thought, I don't want to fight him. I want to talk to him. Phoebe came at 8 in the morning with a thermos of coffee. You didn't sleep. No. You look like you didn't sleep. That's because I didn't. Drink this. Goldie drank. Phoebe sat in the folding chair Goldie had set up for her in the bay. She watched Goldie pace. Tell me. He was one of them. One of who? The 14, from the school, Reed Faraday, the developer. He was 8 years old. Phoebe set the thermos down. Alden knew. He knew. He kept a file. On Reed. On all 14, there are folders in the cabinet up there. I checked last night. He kept track of every one of them for 12 years. Where they went to high school, where they went to college, who got married, who had children. Reed's folder was the thickest, because Reed stayed in Ironbridge Falls. Phoebe's hand went to the silver chain around her neck. The brass key was gone. She had given it away. The chain felt strange against her collarbone without it. Alden never told me. He wouldn't have. No, he wouldn't have. Goldie stopped pacing. She knelt in front of the older woman. Phoebe, I'm going to go see him. Reed. Yes. You don't owe him a conversation. I know. He filed a petition to take your building. I know. He came at you with an attorney. I know. Then why? Goldie looked at her hands. Because the only person in this town who hurts more than I did is him. Phoebe was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Take Bowen with you. No. Goldie. I have to do this alone. Promise me one thing. What? If he refuses to listen, you leave. You come back here. You do not stay in a room with a man who will not hear you. I promise. Phoebe set her hand against Goldie's cheek. Just for a second. The hand was cold and thin and steadier than Goldie had expected. Then she pulled it back. Go. Reed Faraday's office was on the third floor of a renovated bank building on Main Street. Glass door, brass lettering, Faraday Development, LLC. Goldie did not announce herself at reception. She walked past the woman at the front desk. The woman said, "Excuse me," in the tone receptionists use when they are about to call someone. Goldie said, "I'm here about the Firehouse," in the tone of a person who is already through the inner door. Reed Faraday looked up from his desk. His face did the thing faces do when a person they have been thinking about walks in. She set the school portrait on his desk. Face up. The small boy in the striped shirt looked up at him from the green hanging folder. Reed looked at the photograph. He did not pick it up. He did not move. For a long moment. Then he sat down very slowly in his chair, as if the chair was the only thing keeping him from falling through the floor. Where did you get this? Alden Westmore kept it for 19 years. He kept everyone's. He told me. He's been gone for over a year. His notes told me. Yesterday. Reed did not look up from the photograph. What do you want? To talk. About the building. About my mother. He flinched. She did not pretend not to see it. Reed, don't say my name like that. Like what? Like you knew me. I didn't know you, but you knew her. For 30 seconds. In a window. He put his hands flat on the desk on either side of the photograph. His knuckles were white. I have spent 19 years not thinking about that 30 seconds. Do you understand what you're asking me to do right now? Yes? Then why? Because I've spent 19 years not knowing she existed, and you spent 19 years not being allowed to forget. And we are not the same, but we have been living next to the same fire from opposite sides of the wall, and I am tired of the wall. Reed pressed his hands harder against the desk. For a moment, Goldie thought he was going to ask her to leave. He did not. He said, I remember her face. Goldie did not breathe. Just the face, not the words, not what she said, but I remember the face, because the face was very calm. And I remember thinking, as an 8-year-old, I remember thinking, this lady is not afraid, so I do not have to be afraid. His voice cracked on the last word. He stopped. He turned his face toward the window. For a long time, he did not speak. When he turned back, his eyes were wet. I didn't know it was her. What? When I bought the lots 2 years ago, the building was already condemned, already going to auction. I made offers to the county for the assemblage. The plan was retail and residential. I told myself the numbers worked. They did. They do. But you wanted it gone. I wanted it gone, yes. Because every morning, when I drive to this office, I have to pass it. And every morning I have to pass it. I have to not think about the woman whose face I cannot remember the words of. And I have done that for 19 years. And I am tired. I am very, very tired. Goldie's chest hurt, the way chests hurt when they are full of something they cannot put down. Read. What? You don't have to carry her by tearing it down. You can carry her by keeping it standing. He looked at her. That's the most foster child sentence I've ever heard a person say. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be. I am, though. I know. There was a long pause, then Reed said, There's something else. What? My mother wrote you a letter? Your mother. She lives. She lives in a memory care facility on Sycamore. She is 81, her mind is. It comes and goes. She knew you bought the building. The story went around. Last week, she got very upset. She told me she had to stop you. She thinks if you stay, if you keep the building, I will. The worry will take me, like it took my father. Goldie's mouth went dry. What? She wrote you a letter. 3 nights ago, the night nurse found her. She had walked to the post office, half a mile in her nightgown. She mailed it. I don't know what it says. I didn't read it. I knew she had done it. The night nurse called me. I came over, I took her hand. I asked her what she had written. She said, I told that girl to leave my son alone. I told that girl her parents would have wanted her to leave him be. Goldie sat down in the chair across from him. She had not realized she was standing. Read. It came yesterday to my office in a plain envelope, addressed to the Firehouse. The post office returned it to me because she put my office return address on the back. I have it in my drawer. I have not opened it. I was going to throw it away. I am sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry. I am. She put up a hand. He stopped. I want to read it. Goldie. Give it to me. He pulled open his bottom drawer. The envelope was inside, plain, white. The address in shaky old woman handwriting. The girl, the Firehouse on Briggs Street. Goldie took it. She opened it. The letter was 1 page, loose-lined paper. The handwriting wandered, got smaller in places, larger in others. My dear girl, I do not know you, but I know what your parents did. I know what your mother did. She carried my boy out of a window. He was 8. He has not slept right since. I have watched him not sleep right for 19 years. He carries her. Every day he carries her. I love my son. I love him in the only way a mother knows how to love, which is by being afraid for him. And I am afraid now, because you are here, and he will see you, and he will see her in your face, and he will not survive seeing her again. So I am writing to ask you, please, please, please leave him be. Leave the building. Take whatever money you came for. I will help you. I have a little. Take it. And go. He is the only thing I have left. Your mother would understand. A mother always understands. Please, with love. From a woman who is also a mother. Marion Faraday. Goldie set the letter down. She put her hand over her mouth. She did not cry, but her shoulders were shaking just a little. Reed stood up. He came around the desk. He stood beside her chair. She did not look up at him. After a moment, she reached out, and she took his hand. She held it. The way you hold the hand of a person at a hospital bedside. He sat down on the edge of the desk. He did not let go of her hand. They sat like that for what felt like a long time, but was probably only a minute. Goldie wiped her face with her free hand. I want to meet her. My mother. Yes. Goldie. I want her to see I am not your mother. I am her daughter. I want her to see the difference. She might not understand. That's all right. It might upset her. I want to try. He looked at her for a long moment. He nodded. The memory care facility was a long, single-story building set back from the road. Geraniums in window boxes that had not been pulled yet for the season. A circular drive. a small bench by the entrance, the kind of place that has been designed for people who will not leave. A nurse in pink scrubs led them down a hallway. Marion Faraday's room was at the end. She was sitting in a wing chair by the window. She wore a knit cardigan, pearl earrings, her hair white and neat, a small wooden tray on her lap with a half-finished crossword. She looked up when they came in. She looked at Reed. She smiled. "Hello, darling." "Hello, Mom." "Who is your friend?" Reed sat down on the edge of the bed across from her chair. "Mom, this is Goldie." The smile stayed in place. For a moment. Then Marion Faraday looked at Goldie. The smile faded. Her hand went to the collar of her cardigan. "Oh, Mom. Oh, 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 I know who you are. I wrote to you. Did you get it? I wrote to you." "I got it. Don't take him." "Mrs. Faraday, please don't take him. I have so little. I know what your mother did. I am so grateful. But please, please." "Mrs. Faraday, yes, I am not here to take him." Marion Faraday looked at her. Her eyes wandered, then steadied. "You aren't. No. You aren't going to make him sad." "No. He's been sad for so long." "I know. My husband died. Of the worry. Did Reed tell you that? Of the worry. He worried himself dead. 3 years after the fire. He could not stop thinking about what would have happened if Reed had not come home. He could not stop thinking. And the thinking. The thinking is what killed him. Reed does not know I know that. But I know that. I have known it for 16 years. Reed's head came up. He looked at his mother. She did not see it. She was looking at Goldie. "Mrs. Faraday." "Yes, child. I am going to keep the building." "Oh. But it is going to be for people like me, children who have nowhere to go when they grow up. The building is going to be a place where they can land so that they don't have to sleep behind closed blockbusters." "Behind. It doesn't matter. I am going to make the building be for that. And I want you to know that your son is going to be the first person who helped me do it, if he wants to be." Marion Faraday turned her head and looked at her son. Reed was looking at his hands. His shoulders were shaking. Marion Faraday reached out, touched her son's wrist. "Darling." He looked up. "Darling," she said again. "Is this all right?" He did not answer at first. Then, "Yes, Mom. This is all right." Marion Faraday looked back at Goldie. Her eyes filled. "Your mother carried him out a window." "I know. She did not have to." "She did." "What was her name?" I never knew her name." "Lyra." "Lyra." "Yes." "Lyra Aldridge." "Yes." Marion Faraday closed her eyes. She held her son's wrist. She said the name twice more under her breath, like she was committing it to whatever part of her mind would still hold things. After a while, she opened her eyes. Her gaze was clearer. Lyra would be proud of you, I think. I do not know her, but I think a mother knows about other mothers. Lyra would be very proud." Goldie's throat was tight. She nodded. She could not speak. When they came out of the memory care facility, the afternoon light was slanting across the parking lot. Reed stopped at his car. He held his keys. He did not put them in the door. "Goldie?" "Yes?" "I am going to withdraw the petition." "Thank you. I am going to buy the first window, the new windows, for the building, all of them, as a donation." "That's a lot of windows." "I know how many windows that building has. I have counted them, from my car, for 2 years." "Reed." "Yes." Bring her, bring your mother, bring her to the dedication. We're going to have a dedication." I haven't planned it yet, but we will. And bring her, so she can see Lyra's name on the wall. He looked at her over the roof of his car. I will. The dedication was on the second Saturday of November. Goldie did the planning herself, with Phoebe in the folding chair watching every decision, with Bowen Crockett bringing chairs and a portable grill and a coffee urn across the street, with Imogen Saltonstall coming over from Sycamore Street with a casserole and a quiet refusal to discuss why she had brought one. The plaque was made by a man named Gideon Hurst at a metalworking shop in the county seat. Gideon was in his 70s. He had been making plaques for 40 years. He listened to what Goldie wanted without interrupting. The plaque read, "In memory of Dorrance Daniel Aldridge and Lyra Ann Aldridge, volunteer firefighters who gave their lives on October 14, 2006, carrying 14 children to safety from the Maple Street school fire. Their courage is the foundation of the station. Their daughter carries it forward. Below their names, in smaller letters, the names of the 14 children. Goldie had verified each one, twice, against Alden's folders, against the school district records, against the newspaper coverage. The morning of the dedication was clear and cold. By 9:30, there were 40 people on the concrete pad. By 10, there were 90. People kept arriving. The retired teacher whose mortgage payments had been covered in 2002. The older couple who had nearly lost their house in 2008. The woman whose mother's medical bills had been paid in 1993. Carol Marsh, the plumber. Maud Ellsworth, the electrician. Tamsin Brewer, the contractor who had been showing up Saturdays for 2 weeks to help with the Western Tower. Cordy Marwick from the bank. The county clerk. The judge who had signed Alden's trust. And the people Goldie had not expected. A man in his late 20s, carrying a small boy on his shoulders. I was in that classroom, the man said. I was number 3. I have been trying to write you a letter for 19 years. I have started 6 of them. I never finished one. I came today to bring it. He pressed a folded piece of paper into Goldie's hand. A woman in her early 30s with a baby in a sling. I was number 11. Your mother carried my sister out before me. My sister and I are both here. My sister is the one with the green coat. We brought our daughters. A woman in her late 20s. Tall, dark hair. I was number 7. My name is Charlotte. I have one of your father's wooden fire trucks. He gave it to my brother. My brother gave it to me. I want you to have it back. A man in his 30s pushing a wheelchair. The woman in the chair was his mother. My mother does not speak anymore, but she was the music teacher at Maple Street. She wanted to come. She wanted to be here. By the time Phoebe Westmore stepped up beside the plaque with her cane and her wool coat and her wire-rimmed glasses, there were 140 people on the concrete pad and spilling into Briggs Street. Bowen Crockett had locked his store for the morning. Reed Faraday stood near the back of the crowd, his arm around an elderly woman in a wing chair that he had brought in his pickup truck. Marion Faraday wore the pearl earrings. She was looking up at the Eastern Tower. Phoebe Westmore spoke quietly, but the crowd was quieter than she was. Most of you knew Alden. Some of you are too young to have known him well. But all of you live in a town that Alden spent 30 years quietly holding together. And I think it matters that you know that. She looked at Goldie. The young woman standing beside me is Goldie Aldridge. She is the daughter of Dorrance and Lyra Aldridge, who served at this station, who died in the school fire in 2006. Goldie was 7 months old when her parents died. She spent 19 years in the foster care system. Nobody told her who her parents were. Nobody told her this station existed. She paused. She found it on her own, at a tax auction, for $10. The crowd was still. Alden spent the last 12 years of his life trying to find this girl. Walter Briggs spent 6 before him. 18 years of looking. They sealed the station and everything inside it. Alden bought the building with his own money. They kept it standing because they believed that one day she would find her way here. A pause. He always said the station would find her. He was right. She turned to Goldie. You don't have to speak, but you may. Goldie stepped up beside the plaque. She looked out over the crowd. She did not have notes. She had not written anything down, because she did not know what she was going to say until the moment she opened her mouth. She said, "My parents saved 14 children. I have spent the last 4 weeks learning their names. The names are on this wall now, where they should be, where they should have been since the day of the fire, where they will be from now on as long as this building stands. And this building is going to stand." She paused. There are 23,000 young people in this country who age out of foster care every year. 40% of them are homeless within 18 months. I was one of them. I was on the way to being one of them. Until a man I never met bought a building and waited. She looked at the Western Tower. I am going to open the Western Tower as a transition house for young people aging out of the foster system. There will be 6 beds, there will be a kitchen, there will be one rule, which is that you can stay as long as you need to figure out the next thing. That is the only rule. I will run it from the fund my parents' friends built. I will run it as long as I am able to. She paused again. I am 19 years old. I do not know how to run a building. I do not know how to run a fund. I do not know how to run a transition house. I do not know how to do most of the things I just told you I'm going to do. She looked at the crowd. So I am going to need help. The first hand went up in the 3rd row. Bowen Crockett. The second hand was Carol Marsh. The third was Maud Ellsworth. The fourth was Reed Faraday. By the time the hands had finished going up, there were 63. Then, Goldie said the last thing. There is a bell at the top of the Eastern Tower. It is 900 pounds of brass. It has not rung in 12 years. Alden did not ring it after the fire. He could not bring himself to. He sealed the room next to it, and he did not climb back up to ring it. I would like to ring it now. Once, for my mother and my father, and once for Alden Westmore, and once for everyone who is on this pad today, including the people we lost and the people we did not lose. She looked up. 3 times. She walked to the foot of the Eastern Tower. She climbed 40 feet of brick ladder, past the 3rd landing, to a small interior platform she had built that week with Tamsin Brewer's help. The platform let her stand at the same level as the bell. The rope hung in front of her. Hemp. New. She had replaced it the day before. The old one was rotted. She took the rope in her hands. She looked out across the town she had not known existed 5 weeks earlier. She pulled. The bell rang. A single deep, clear note that rolled out over the rooftops of Iron Bridge Falls in a way that had not been heard by anyone under the age of 20 in the entire town. It traveled out across Briggs Street and down Main and across the river. It came back from the hills in a long, slow echo. She pulled again. The second note. Longer. Larger. The bronze warming up to itself after a decade of silence. She let the rope settle. She breathed. She pulled a 3rd time. The 3rd note rose, and held, and rose, and held, until the entire town was inside it. She did not pull a 4th time. She climbed down. On the concrete pad, people were holding each other. Marion Faraday was crying without sound. Her son was kneeling beside her wheelchair, his hand on her hand. Phoebe was holding the corner of her cane with both hands, her eyes closed. Bowen had taken off his cap. Imogen Saltonstall stood at the edge of the crowd with her arms crossed over her chest, the way you cross your arms when you are holding in something that wants to come out. After the ceremony, there was food. Bowen ran the grill. Carol Marsh poured coffee. The retired teacher set up a folding table by the bay door, and people brought casseroles and bread and pies until the table was full, and a second folding table had to be brought from the church basement. Children ran in and out of the bay. The 1924 La France parked back where it had always been. The dust polished off the brass, the headlamps gleaming. Charlotte, number 7, brought Goldie a small wooden fire truck. The truck was painted red, the size of a shoebox. On the side of the truck in faded white paint were the words Marigold's Truck. The paint had worn down in the places where small hands had held it. Goldie took it in both hands. Charlotte said, "He gave it to my brother because my brother was 4 years old, and my brother gave it to me when I turned 6, and I have kept it on my dresser. For 19 years, I have always known, from my mother, who it had been meant for. I have always known I was keeping it, and I always thought, if I ever met her, I would give it back." Goldie held the small fire truck. She did not have words. She just held it. Charlotte smiled. She put a hand on Goldie's shoulder. She walked away. That afternoon, when most of the guests had gone, Goldie sat on the front step of the firehouse with Phoebe. A pile of letters sat between them, 12 of them, sealed envelopes, with Goldie's name on each one, in 12 different handwritings, brought by 12 of the 14 children. Each one written, started, set aside, started again, over years, some over a decade. Alden had suggested it to them when they were old enough to understand. Write to her if you ever feel like you need to. Even if she will never read it, even if you never send it, write the letter. It will help you carry what you have to carry. So they had written. And now 12 of them were sitting on the step beside Goldie. The 13th would arrive in the mail 3 days later. The 14th was a man named Brendan who had moved to Oregon and could not come back for the dedication, but who called Goldie that evening and read his letter to her over the phone. He cried halfway through. He read it anyway. Goldie read the first letter that afternoon. She read the next, and the next. She read them all that week. Sitting at Alden's desk, in the small round room at the top of the eastern tower, with the candle lit, and the eastern window slit looking out over Iron Bridge Falls, and the photograph of her mother and father on the wall behind her. She wrote a letter back to each one of the 14. It took her 3 months. She did not rush. The construction on the western tower took until the following August. Tamsin Brewer ran the project at cost. Reed Faraday paid for the windows. Bowen Crockett donated every nail and screw. Carol Marsh and Mott Ellsworth did the plumbing and electrical for the price of the materials. The county dropped the building permit fees after the dedication. Volunteers showed up Saturdays. The western tower was reconfigured into 6 small bedrooms, a shared kitchen on the first floor, a common room with 2 couches and a bookshelf and a small wood stove. The room at the top of the western tower was kept open, with a single chair by the window, a view of the river, a small sign on the door. This room is for sitting. There is no other purpose. The first young woman who came to live there was named Adelina. She was 18. She had aged out of the system in Erie. She had heard about the place from a social worker who knew Imogen Saltonstall from years ago. She arrived in February with a duffel bag and a paperback novel and a phone that had been dead for 2 weeks. Goldie met her at the bay door. Goldie said, "There is one rule," Adelina said. "What is it?" Goldie said, "You can stay as long as you need." Adelina cried for an hour. Phoebe was there. She made tea. She did not say anything. She just made tea. Phoebe moved into the small apartment Goldie built on the 2nd floor in May. Her own house went to a couple from the church who had been renting and saving for years. Phoebe took 2 suitcases and her wing chair and a box of photographs. She left everything else. Her garden moved with her. Raised beds along the south side of the firehouse. Lavender, tomatoes, beans in summer, sunflowers along the back fence. She tended them every morning. She drank coffee with Goldie at the kitchen counter most days. She told her about the years she and Alden could not have a child of their own. She told her how Alden had cried in this kitchen the day he found out about the fire. The Alden Westmore Community Fund was incorporated in March. It served Iron Bridge Falls and Erie, and eventually the entire western Allegheny region. Small disbursements, the way Walter Briggs had done it, the way Alden Westmore had done it, the way it was supposed to be done. Goldie reviewed every application herself in November of the 2nd year, on the anniversary of the dedication. Goldie climbed the eastern tower at sunset. She lit the candle. She sat at Alden's desk. She opened the journal he had kept for 12 years. She had been adding to it, her own handwriting, year by year. She had decided to keep the same book going. She wrote that night. Adelina graduated from community college today. She is moving to Pittsburgh to take a job at a hospital. She will be back for Thanksgiving. The bedroom she had is being prepared for a young man named Henrik who arrives Sunday. Reed Faraday brought groceries for the kitchen this morning. His mother passed in October. He was with her. He brought a copy of the letter she wrote me. He asked if I would keep it in the file. I said yes. The file is in the second drawer of the eastern cabinet now, with his school photograph. Phoebe planted the spring bulbs today. The crocuses will come up in March. I am writing this with the candle Alden left burning at his desk 12 years ago in spirit, if not in fact. I think about him every day. I think about Walter Briggs every day. I think about my mother and father every day. They are all in this room with me. She set the pen down. She climbed to the bell platform. She rang the bell once, just once, for an ordinary evening at the end of a year, in a town she had come to without knowing, in a building she had bought for $10, in a life she had built with what she had been given by people who had loved her without ever having met her. The bell rang. The note hung in the cold November air. She climbed down. She went home.